Now we will read about the relationship between sultans and the rayas. We have read that there was a battle which took place between the Ram Raya and the sultans, and finally Ram Raya got a defeat at the hand of the combined forces of the three sultans, the sultans of Bijapur, Golconda and Ahmednagar. Now we will read that what kind of situation was there before this battle, whether there was a enmity in the previous times also between the sultan and the rayas. Rayas were the ruler of the Vijayanagara. So let's discuss about their relationship of the past. The sultans were the reason for the destruction of the city in 1565 after the battle of Talikota, that is also called the battle of Rakshasi Tangdi. But the relationship between the sultans and the rayas was not always hostile. So there was cordial relationship between the sultan and rayas in the past that was not that much hostile in spite of the religious difference. There was religious difference between the religion of raya and the sultan. Sultan used to be the Muslim and rayas used to be the Hindu, but still the relationship was the cordial. For example, Krishna Deva Raya spotted some claimants to power in sultanates and took pride in the title establishers of the Yavana kingdom. The Yavana kingdom stands for the rule of Islamic people in the South India. So there was internal strife in the sultanate for the claim of the power. The successor of a sultan was fighting with each other that who should become the next sultan, and that conflict was resolved by the interference of Krishna Deva Raya. So he pacified that struggle or that conflict, and he used to call himself the establishers of the Yavana kingdom, means he helped to set up the sultanate or to protect that sultanate at that time of crisis. So he helped the sultans. Similarly, the sultans of Bijapur intervened in an attempt to resolve the succession dispute in Vijayanagara following the death of Krishna Deva Raya. When Krishna Deva Raya died, so there was also the succession struggle among the followers or among the descendants of Vijayanagara ruler, that was Krishna Deva Raya, and that struggle was resolved with the interferences or intervention of the Bijapur Sultan. So they used to help each other in the time of crisis, so there was a cordial kind of relationship. According to the historians, the Vijayanagara kings were keen to ensure the stability of the Sultanate and vice versa. It means Vijayanagara was not the enemy of the Sultanate. They wanted that the Sultanate should be stable, and the Sultanates and the people of the Sultanate were also having the same kind of opinion that Vijayanagara kingdom should remain safe and stable. But due to the adventurous policy of Rama Raya, the Rama Raya's policy was to play one sultan against other. So that was a conspiracy which was hatched by Rama Raya. The sultan became an enemy of the Vijayanagara, and finally it was shaked by the combined forces of the sultan. So that was the main reason between the fight of the sultan and the Vijayanagara ruler, and that took place in the battle of Rakshasi Tangdi. Now the Naikas in the Vijayanagara Empire. In the Vijayanagara Empire, the Naikas were military chief who exercised power and controlled forts and had armed supporters. So Naikas used to be like the military chief who used to help the sultan in the battle and at the time of crisis. So that was a system which has been copied from the Ikta system which was going on at that time in the Delhi Sultanate. And according to Ikta system, the land was given to the noble, and on the basis of the income of that land, he used to form a small troop, and that troop used to help the Sultan of Delhi at that time in the time of the battle or in the time of crisis. And that system was also copied by the Sultan of the Vijayanagara, and that system was called the Nayaka system. So Nayaks used to be the military chief. These chiefs often moved from one place to another place, and many times were accompanied by peasants looking for the fertile land in order to settle. So the chief used to get their income from the land, so they were always in the search of the fertile land, and along with the Naikas, the peasants were also moving from one place to another place where they can settle and can do the agriculture in a better way. The Naikas spoke Telugu language and Kannada language. Many Naikas were under the control of the kings of Vijayanagara and often rebelled and faced military action by the kings. So whenever the king used to be in a weaker position, these Nayakas used to become the rebellious, and sometimes there was a conflict between the king as well as among these Nayakas. Then the system of Amarnayaka, that was a system which was coined by the ruler of Vijayanagara. The Amarnayaka system was a major political innovation of the Vijayanagara Empire. Most probably many features of this system were derived from the Ikta system of Delhi Sultanate that I told you earlier also. The Amarnayakas were military commanders and they were given territories to govern by the Raya, and that territory was generally a piece of land, and from that land they used to obtain the revenue also. And their duty was to collect taxes and other dues from peasants, craftsmen and traders, and that was a major source of their income. They kept part of the revenue for the personal use and for the maintaining a stipulated contingent of horses and elephant, and these horses and elephant were the part of their army. So the maintenance of these horses and elephant was also done from the income which they used to obtain from that piece of land which is given to them by the ruler. So that was a system of Amarnayaka system, and the word Amar has come from the summer, the word summer, and summer is a word in Hindi and it means the battle, battlefield or battle. So Amarnayaka system, Amar word has come from summer which means battle. So these Nayakas used to go in the battle for the king, so they were called the Amarnayakas. Some of the revenue of these people also used for maintenance of the temples and irrigation work. Temple were generally built by the Amarnayakas so that they can have faith and they can obtain the faith of the public in them, and the public support can be obtained. That's why they used to build the temple, and secondly they used to show their grandeur. As a result they used to build these temples. And irrigation network were also developed by these people so that the agricultural production can be increased, and increasing agricultural production can result in more revenue. They sent tribute to the king annually. They used to present themselves in front of the ruler annually, and they used to bring a lot of gift for the ruler, and they personally appeared in the royal court with gifts to express their loyalty. Mainly these gifts which is offered by these Amarnayakas to the ruler, that was a kind of submission which they used to show towards the ruler, and the loyalty which they used to show towards the ruler. The kings asserted their control over them by transferring them from one place to another place. Means when these Amarnayakas used to become quite powerful at one place, so there was always a challenge or a chance for the rebellious nature of these Amarnayakas. They could become the rebellious by living a particular place for a long time. As a result, generally the ruler used to transfer these people, and frequent transfer of these Amarnayakas used to be there, and this was done by the ruler to show his own power. In course of time, they established independent kingdom, and this was one of the cause of the weakening or declining of the Vijayanagara Empire. When the king became weaker in the Vijayanagara Empire, so the central control of the Vijayanagara became weaker, and whenever the central control used to be weaker, then these Amarnayakas, who used to be powerful also, they started asserting their importance, and they set up the new kingdoms that was independent from the central rule of Vijayanagara. As a result, Vijayanagara Empire started disintegrating. And the travelers who visited at that time in the city of Vijayanagara. Several travelers visited the city and wrote about it, about the grandeur of the city of Vijayanagara. They wrote, mainly the Italian traders named Niccolo di Conti, Persian trader or Persian ambassador Abdul Razak, who was sent by the ruler of Persia, a merchant named Afansi Nikitin, and who was from Russia, all of whom visited the city in 15th century. So these were the travelers who visited the city in the 15th century. Dorate Barbosa, who came from the Portugal, Domingo Pais and Fernão Nunes from the Portugal, who came in the 16th century. So these are the travelers who visited Vijayanagara Empire in different times under different rules, and they wrote about the administration, the city and its trade. And that is an important source to know the history of that time. So we are having much literary sources to know about the Vijayanagara kingdom. Now, another important feature of Vijayanagara is the maintenance of water resources. Now you can see that Vijayanagara used to lie in an area which used to be semi-arid, and as a result water was very important for the people of Vijayanagara, and secondly agriculture was also a major source of revenue, so they required water for the agriculture as well. So how they used to manage their water resources, that we will discuss here. Vijayanagara was located in the natural basin formed by the river Tungabhadra, which is a tributary of river Krishna, which flows in the north-easterly direction. Means in the city the river used to flow in the northeasterly direction, and large granite hills formed a girdle like a waist belt around the city. It means, suppose this is the city, the river used to flow like this, and there used to be the hills surrounding the city. So the city was guarded from one side by the river, and from other side it is guarded by the hills. A number of streams flowed from these rocky outcrops to the river. Generally these hills were low hills made up of the granites, and as a result whenever there used to be rainfall, small streams appear from these hills, and that used to go to the river. And these small streams were also the channels of water which used to take from one place to another place. Later on, these small streams were used to collect the rainwater. Embankment, that is called chira, were built along these streams to create reservoir of different sizes. Means these streams were stopped by creating embankment on their way, and the water used to be collected, and that is a way to harvest the rainwater, and that was the major source of the water resource for the Vijayanagara. So the water need of Vijayanagara was met mainly by the river Tungabhadra and the streams which used to come down from these rocky outcrop or rocky hills. Since Vijayanagara was one of the most arid zones of the peninsula, I told you that it used to be semi-arid zone where rainfall used to be less. Elaborate arrangements were made to store the rainwater which was used by the people of the city. So that was a kind of the management of water resources, and it was a very good management of water resources. As a result, there was no lack of water resources, or there was no scarcity of water in the city of Vijayanagara. Now you can see that there is an image of a tank, and it is also a masterpiece of architecture where water used to be stored, and generally in this tank the water used to come from the hills which was coming through the downstreams which were coming down from the hills, and water used to be stored in this tank, and this was the tank which used to supply the drinking water to the palace of the ruler. And the name of this tank was the Kamalapuram tank, and it is the most important tank built in the early years of the 15th century. And water from this tank was used not only to irrigate the field but also to channel water into the royal center. And in the royal center, who used to live there? The king of the Vijayanagara Empire. So this is the Kamalapuram tank where water used to be stored, and mainly rainwater used to be stored, and this water was used for irrigation as well as for drinking in the royal palace. Now you can see that this is a conduit, and this is known as Hiriya Canal, which was used to take water from river Tungabhadra to the city center. The Hiriya Canal was one of the most prominent waterworks. This canal drew water from the dam which was built across river Tungabhadra. So the water of the Tungabhadra was stored by building a dam, and from there river was channelized, a canal was stretched, and that used to channelize the water of river Tungabhadra to the city. And it was used for irrigation, as well as it was used for the water requirement of the sacred center. And the sacred center was the place where a number of temples used to be built, and mainly the famous temple of the sacred center was Virupaksha temple, that was devoted to Lord Shiva. From urban core, the canal was built by the king of the Sangma dynasty, and the name of that king was the Devaraya. So there used to be construction of canal and tanks by different rulers, and that was a major source of the water for the people of Vijayanagara. Here it is an image of a tank. You can see that the tank is surrounded by the hills, and when the stream used to come down the hills, the water used to be stored in this tank, and that water was used in the later stages for the drinking as well as for the irrigation.